You know the saying, Houston, we have a problem. You remember that? That, of course, was said during the Apollo 13 space mission. While circling the moon, astronaut Jack Swigert flipped a switch just to perform a routine procedure. The moment he did that, the spacecraft shook. Oxygen pressure fell. Power disappeared. That was the moment when we heard the iconic words,
Houston, we've had a problem.
"A problem?" Said very nonchalantly, "A problem?" They actually had many problems, not just a problem. The big problem was how to get everyone back to Earth safely. The immediate problem was the air filter. They had to learn to purify the air, or everyone on board would die. They had to do something that they'd never even thought of as a remote possibility. They'd never practiced it. NASA engineers do not like to do that. They like to have everything thought out. They had one goal, though, that day: solve the problems. Solve the problems. They began by retrofitting the air filter. In essence, learning how to put a square peg in a round hole using only the materials that they could find on board ship. They ripped the cover off the manual, making a piece of cardboard, plastic, and good old duct tape, and they fashioned a new air filter connection. NASA had a unique mindset that day. Gene Kranz was the flight director, and he said this. He said, "I don't think we ever lost hope. This was a problem to solve, and we were all going to work together to find a solution." Apollo 13 was a life or death situation. But that's not the way that most change happens in our lives, is it? Most change happens with some news about a disruption, something that's changing. And then we have the choice to figure out what we're going to do about this disruption. It could be on a personal note, maybe bad news from the doctor, the ending of a relationship, or professionally, a whole new way of doing your job. Whatever it is, when we look at change and disruption, it almost always happens at the worst possible time. Every change, even if it's planned, either good or bad, it disrupts our life. It changes the status quo. Do you see the difference between the two examples? I want to talk about a second example. Years later, when NASA called me to help them with another problem: the ending of the space shuttle program. The cancellation of the space shuttle program, do you remember that? Do you remember when that actually happened? If you lived in South Florida at the time, you would have been panicked because they potentially were going to lose 20,000 jobs as a result. That day, as I was invited to speak at NASA, I spoke about one simple thing: how to change. The same thing I'm speaking to you about today. After my presentation, I had the opportunity to talk with many different people. Let me tell you about 3 conversations that stand out. The first person was a rocket scientist. He approached me, and I could tell by his face that he was very upset. He said to me, "Mark, I'm a rocket scientist. Now what?" He thought he was losing his job. Then there was Mike Linebeck, who was the shuttle launch director. He said, "We've always had another program to transition into. We had Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Skylab, and now the shuttle. And now we don't have anything." And then there was a third example. Linda Weatherman, who is the CEO of the Economic Development Commission of the Florida Space Coast. She said this. She said to everyone, This is an exciting time. We're going to pivot from a government space program to commercial space companies. I remember when I heard those words, I thought, private space companies? Who's ever heard of such a thing? And yet, as she predicted, 1 year later, SpaceX sent the first spacecraft to the International Space Station, and they kept pivoting. They were actually able, even in that climate, even in that situation, they were able to entice Boeing and Lockheed Martin to move their headquarters to South Florida. Today, they have more engineers per capita in South Florida than anywhere else in the United States. Today, they have the largest high-tech economy in all of Florida. And my question is this: how did they do that? How were they able to pivot and change given those circumstances, given those challenges? Well, what I noticed in working with them was that there was a shift, particularly amongst the leaders. There was a shift from an innovation mindset to a transformation mindset. Do you see the difference? Do you know the difference between innovation and transformation? Well, think of it. Innovation, there's lots of talk about innovation, but innovation is making improvements, trying to make something better, taking small steps to improve a situation, or a new big idea. That's innovation. Transformation is completely different. Transformation begins with you as a leader. What happens in transformation? It's changing who you are in order to adapt. Not just making a few changes. It changes who you are to where you are transformed. What changes in transformation? Some people say everything. Because we realign ourselves to the disruptive future trend that we see coming right at us. The trade and finance industries that you are involved in today, think about it. In 10 years, you probably won't even recognize what it's like. In 10 years, it's going to be that different. A few innovations here and there will not cut it. It requires transformation. How do you adapt? How do you do that? How do you adapt to transformation? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that the process is very stressful. I want you to think today, as I'm talking about transformation, I want you to think in two areas. For you as a leader, but also for your people. Because if transformation is going to happen, and we're going to be able to respond and adapt to these changes, we have to be able to do that as leaders, and we have to enable our people to transform as well. So think on those two levels, for yourself and for your people. Think for a moment. When you are disrupted, how do you tend to respond? It could be that your immediate reaction is one of confusion. Why is this happening? What's happening? It could be a sense of helplessness or even anxiety about the unknown. And as I've listed 3 possibilities, if I were to ask everyone here today, how do you respond? I guarantee you there wouldn't be one answer. There would be at least 25 answers. Think of your people as well. How do they respond to disruption? We start there. I know you're going through many changes. And I want to say that my promise to you today is the same promise I made to NASA years ago. And that is this: there is a way forward through disruption. Like a pathway, a map through the maze. I want to talk to you today about how to empower change so that transformation takes place. I'm going to offer some practical strategies and some guidance through what I would call even the stages that happen in change. What you'll see as I talk about these stages today is it actually shows you where you are in the process. It shows you what to do while you're there, and even more importantly, it shows you what's coming next. As you think about that kind of empowerment, how would that help you and your team if everyone were able to do that kind of response? Well, to understand change as well as ourselves, what I'd like to do is I want to have a game with you today, a game called Balderdash. Balderdash is a parlor game. It's a bluffing game. And you have to come up with a definition for a word that you haven't a clue what it means, most likely. Some of you might know. We have a lot of people here. I'm going to give you a word to define in just a moment, and you're going to come up with a fabulous definition for this word. Now, to make it fun, two things. You're not going to do this on your own. Oh, no. You're going to work with a partner. So in a moment, you're going to choose a partner. So start thinking, who could I choose? All right? Because for the first 3 people who are willing to stand and give their definition, you're going to earn Lindor chocolates. There's a lot at stake here right now. This is, I don't know if you just want to impress your colleagues or if you just want those chocolates. But whatever it is, this is a time when you need to choose the most intelligent person in the room to be your partner. It's probably going to be the person sitting next to you. In fact, turn to them now, give them a high five, and tell them you're working with me. High fives, get your partner. All right. Are you ready for the word? Some of you probably will know this. Some of you may not. Here is the word. The word that you're going to define is liminality. Say that with me right now. Liminality. That is your word for the day. You have 30 seconds, no more, no less, 30 seconds to define the word, and then I'm looking for volunteers for the Lindor chocolates. Ready, set, go. Define the word liminality. Whoa, okay, we got some real keeners here. I said ready, set, go, and she's waving her hand already. Okay, so stand up here, please. Turn around. I want to, now notice this.
Oh, thank you.
First of all, I haven't even heard her definition, and there's your chocolates.
Oh, thank you.
So tell us, please, what is your name?
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie.
Is my name.
Okay. We are dying to know. What is liminality?
Liminality is the last number of infinity.
Oh, did you see the confidence there? Wow, nice job. All right, big round of applause. And I saw was someone over here raising their hand? No? Okay. Raising the hand, of course. The other side of the room, I'll run over here. Now, you see the bar is pretty high, what Mackenzie gave us. Now we are coming over here, and there is your chocolate. Would you please stand and join me right here? Tell us your name.
My name is Chandler Kenny.
Okay, and we would love to know, what do you think liminality is?
Liminality is a pregnancy craving for Lindor chocolates.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. You know, I've never had that answer before. Nice job. Do you want to know what liminality is? Liminality is actually really important to what we're talking about today. Liminality is the study of transitions. Transitions comes from the Latin word limen, which means literally doorway. Now, why doorway? What does doorway and transitions have to do with one another? Well, think about it. When we open a doorway, we go from outside to inside, or vice versa. We go from one place to another. But in the doorway of transitions, we go from the old way to a new way. We go from the known to the unknown. And it's in transitions where we learn to adapt. Let me say that again. It's in transitions where we learn to adapt. The hardest thing about transitions is walking through the doorway. Not once, not twice, but again and again. The most successful people, by far, are the ones who learn to adapt quickly through the transitions. Let's talk about some common reactions again. When we're disrupted, how do we respond? Well, when we think about the transitions, we're right in the middle of that. These are some common reactions that we find. Shock, disbelief, but did you also know paralysis? That inability to actually move. You're just stuck. You're right there. Think for a moment about a major change in your life. Perhaps the most difficult one in the last 5 years. What is it? Think of that right now. How did you react to that? Did you react like this? Deer in the headlights. Could I tell you about my deer in the headlights experience? 8 years ago, I was invited to Rotterdam to speak for Shell Oil at their headquarters. Now, I was excited. I'd never been to Rotterdam, and I hadn't worked with Shell, so it was a great opportunity. I flew all day to get there. Driver picked me up in Amsterdam, drove me to Rotterdam, and when we got to Rotterdam, he said, "There's your hotel." And I said, "Where?" Because he actually drove me to the Rotterdam harbor, and this was my hotel. I said, "Where?" He said, "That's your hotel. The Rotterdam cruise ship has been turned into a luxury cruise liner." So I thought, well, that's really cool. After I checked in, I couldn't wait to go up to my room to see my room. I opened the door. The Dutch. There on the counter was a bottle of champagne and Dutch chocolates for me. But what I really wanted to do was to go into the bathroom and see what soaps and shampoos I could steal before leaving. But a curious thing happened. As I stepped into the bathroom, I stopped because I looked down, something caught my eye. There was like a 1-inch step going into the bathroom, and I remember thinking, what's that doing there? And that's not really safe. But I walked through anyway. Looked around, realized it was getting late. I needed to get to sleep, set my alarm clock, went to bed. I got up the next morning, groggy, jet-lagged. I shuffled to the bathroom. Don't get ahead of me. And as I stepped through that doorway, my toe caught that 1-inch step. Immediately, I fell forward. My head slammed into the wall. I heard my neck crack, and I fell between the toilet and the shower with my head jammed against the wall in the most uncomfortable position. And I remember thinking, oh, that crack didn't sound good. I took a deep breath, made a move to get up, when I realized I was totally paralyzed from the neck down. The hardest thing is walking through that doorway that we all have to walk through. The hardest thing is going through those stages of transition in order to be empowered in change. I had to do that over the course of many months. And you do with every change that you adapt to. Let's look at what that actually looks like. I want you to think about your story. I just told one of my stories. I want you to think about your story now about empowered change. The best illustration that I can give for understanding change and transition is the process of metamorphosis, how a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Now, this is an interesting process. It happens in 30 days in 4 distinct and predictable stages: egg, caterpillar, pupa, and finally butterfly. Each stage requires work. If the caterpillar doesn't do the work at his stage, he stays a caterpillar and doesn't become a butterfly. The job of a caterpillar is to eat leaves. The job of the pupa stage is to slowly transform through the hibernation process. Transitions are always about transformation. Think again of what you're going through. Transitions are about transformation. It's about becoming something or someone new. Change happens fast. Transitions never do. For us, change also happens in transitions. Predictable stages with work that must be done at each stage. Here's my model of transition management. 3 stages. Stage 1 is the stage of crisis. Stage 2, limbo. Stage 3, the new start, when the change actually occurs. There is a free download for this. I'll also put it up at the end of my presentation for those. Don't panic, you'll get a chance. Let's look at stage 1. Stage 1 is the stage of crisis. It's a crisis, it's a separation, it's an ending to the way things were. Let that sink in, because every time there is a change, and every time we go through a transition, it's a separation from the way things were. That's over. It's characterized by time of anxiety, worry, and panic. Remember buying a lifetime supply of toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic? Don't raise your hands and embarrass yourselves. But it's also characterized by positive feelings. You see, in stage 1, we're a little bit naive. We don't actually know what's going to be happening in the future. But in stage 1, we say things like, we're in this together. We'll get through this. We say that in stage 1. The work of stage 1 is this: we must learn to accept and let go. We must accept this disruption and let go of the past. That's the work. It sounds simple in terms of these words, but it is extremely difficult because we may be fear or hesitant of the unknown. We may not even understand the change when we first hear about it, which we probably don't. And we may not even like the change. Difficult to accept and let go. When we are struggling to accept and let go, there are 3 questions that can help us and help the people that we work with. Here they are. 3 of the top questions. What is the change? What will be different? Who's losing and gaining what? Question